Pascal watch. The mood is tense. 1867 is back at you for another week. And I mean, buddy, the reason why we're starting out with a Pascal watch is because, like we were talking last week, we actually got some maybe breaking news happening later tonight, but we just got a note saying that the Toronto Raptors are fully engaged in trade negotiations with the Indiana Pacers as we speak. So we could be breaking a trade live on air tonight.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with the tape delay that we've got there. Of we're recording on Tuesday, it'll be out on Wednesday. So this may or may not be the breaking news of the century.
We'll timestamp it. We'll say, look, we were here. We broke it when it was actually there. Doesn't matter. And you know,
9:27 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, we can always edit it going back. That's the beauty of it. But anyways, how you doing, man? Kyle and Kyle back with you for week 2 of 1867.
There we go. We survived. We didn't get canceled after 1 week. So you know what? Feather in our hats, Pats, golf claps all around to us. Survived episode 1, back for another one. And like it was good timing that we did episode 1. Pascal, will he, won't he? Sounds like Indiana is very much in the mix right now with Shams Charania breaking some news that Bruce Bowen could be the
Bruce Brown. We're not going back to the 90s for a Spurs defender.
First of all, it's hilarious because I was actually watching Bruce Bowen highlights for something completely different earlier today. So I'm clearly just still in that mode of Mr. Big Game Bowen there. Bruce Brown, formerly of the Denver Nuggets, now with the Pacers, is going to be the salary match there.
But yeah, Bruce Brown, some salaries, and 3 first-round picks, which is what's being reported right now. So not the proposed Canadian national team reunion like you were proposing last week. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I think given that you're in the last year of a contract and you're heading into a trade deadline where obviously you're going to be sellers, not a bad return, considering that you're in a rebuild. You're looking at, look, we've got some young pieces back from the OG Anunoby trade. We can build around them, Scotty Barnes. And yeah, I mean, those 3 first-round picks, even though they probably won't end up in the top 10, hey, if Indiana somehow misses the playoffs as one of the late seeds, then you're in the lottery. Yeah. So you could get lucky with 2 chances at getting that first overall pick. So hey, at the end of the day, again, it's good that there's actually some talks being made because, again, no news is not necessarily good news when it comes to a trade deadline. But yeah, I mean, let's see what happens because apparently it was very close. Dallas and which other team was it? Golden State, I believe, were the other 2 teams that were in negotiations. But I think pretty far down the rabbit hole with Indiana right now.
Yeah. And again, like you said, 3 first-round picks are nice. Would I like to see one of those maybe get phased out for an actual young player like a Mathurin, like a Jarris Walker, like a Nemhard, something like that? I think I could be a little bit more enthused about that package. Again, right? Like Brown, he's there as essentially a salary match, right? Where he played a really good role on the Denver Nuggets last year, parlayed that into a big payday in the offseason, and good for him, he got the bag. But is he going to be a long-term fit with this club? Probably not, right? So the centerpieces of this are going to be the picks. And we've kind of seen, and it's the Sam Presti effect here of like, let's just accumulate this war chest of pick swaps and first-round picks and this, that, and the other. And I mean, you can, I guess, make the argument, hey, it's turned out pretty well. Look at how well Oklahoma City is doing this year. But a lot of that were with pieces they kind of had in place as the rebuild was going on. Like they really haven't turned all these 500 first rounders into too much. And we talked about it last week where outside of the top 10, you're just picking a lottery number at this point, right? Yeah, could hit a home run, could be someone who never even makes it out of the G League. So it's...
Can I just say kudos to us for using 3 non-basketball analogies to describe a basketball trade?
Look look at us. We are nothing if not well-rounded here. So you don't need to be a basketball aficionado you don't need to know the Bruce Bowns versus the Bruce Browns of the world in order to
Not
follow along on this show, my
no,
friend.
not at all. You know, Eagles kicker Sean Elliott.
Yeah. Oh my God. But yeah,
But
at the end of the day, right? 3 first rounders, it's nothing to sneeze at, but I just keep going back to it as far as there were some big offers on the table last year. And is, Brown plus 3 first rounders really the best you can do? Maybe in this market, but you
yeah,
might have left something even more enticing on the table last season.
it's the shoulda, woulda, coulda thing, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you look back, and hindsight's always 2020, and whatever other analogy you want to use to describe that type of thing. You make the move that's best for your franchise at the given time, right? Last year at the trade deadline, Toronto was really one of those teams that they could finish third, they could finish 10th. So you really couldn't guess where they were going to end up. And like, look at what the Heat ended up doing
Yeah.
as one of the play-in seeds, right? So that's the hard part about sports, is that when you have an opportunity to make the playoffs, anything can happen, right? So, I mean, hey, and it, we'll get rid of Pascal. They'll get something back instead of losing him for nothing in free agency. I think that's a win-win scenario. So let's just look at it like that. We'll stay positive for the sake of the show, Kyle.
Yeah.
We'll keep everything, because I have a feeling there's going to be some negativity with the next thing that I'm going to bring up. So let's just we'll leave it at that. We'll stay positive with 3 first rounders. But I mentioned, jokingly, the Eagles kicker, referring to an old San Antonio Spurs, small forward. But yeah, I mean, speaking of the Eagles, I mean, how you feeling about yesterday? I know that I offered to postpone today because of what happened last night, but not Canadian related. But how you feeling about that as an Eagles fan?
Well, I feel like overriding you and being like, nope, not Canadian, don't want to talk about it here. But I also considered wearing a black armband onto the show tonight. But really, in my heart of hearts, it didn't surprise me that we
No.
lost. I mean, this has to go down as the biggest collapse in Eagles franchise history to start the year off at 10-1, and then not just trip into the playoffs, but literally have your limp corpse dragged across the finish line into there. And we were even talking before the show, like you mentioned, it didn't even look like they showed up. Like
No.
something happened at some point after that San Francisco 49ers game. And I don't know if it's that they quit on just the coordinators or the whole coaching staff, but they
Yeah.
quit. They hung those coaches out to dry. And it takes a lot for me to say anything good about Matt Patricia and, laminated sheet and a pencil behind the ear, how that works out in your genius schemes. I have no idea, but it really was very telling. And even the comments that players, veteran players, like all pro players, like Darius Slay Jr., who, doesn't throw people under the bus very often, but is literally saying, like, I don't know what's going on with the scheme. We're working through it. They're trying to, like, something happened in there, and
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get the what does Bill Simmons call it? I think it's the Now They Tell Us story that usually
Yeah.
comes out a week after they get eliminated, where these reporters just sit on all these little anecdotes and tidbits, and then something bad happens and it's like, all
Ooh.
right, here's a notes dump. Here's how I could see this coming in week 6, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll get some sort of giant hit piece, but I'm of the opinion right now that, hey, you know what? I didn't have Super Bowl aspirations for this team based on the last couple of weeks, but it sucks that this is how Jason Kelsey's storied career ends on this note, right? I would have traded our 2018 Super Bowl to have him
Yeah.
have won the Super Bowl last year, retire, then go out a champion. And man, what a parade that would have been.
Yeah, of course, the famed Taylor Swift's brother-in-law, Jason Kelsey.
Mhm.
For all of you non-football people out there,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was funny,
I'm
watching.
glad you took a lot of enjoyment out of that. That was a painful experience for me.
You know, we can get into my team a little bit as well, because obviously they didn't come out on top of their game either. But yeah, the reason why I say it's funny is because you've kind of hit on some topics, but the thing that I take from that game last night, I say it all the time, and Troy Aikman mentioned it several times, calling out the play calling.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I don't want to say that, Brian Johnson's not exactly a good play caller, but there's an art form behind it.
Yeah.
And just because you have the same system in place doesn't mean you're going to call it the same way as someone else would. And I've been saying that for years, like, being a positional coach, being a coordinator, being a head coach at different levels along the way with football. It really is. And that's why I always kind of question why people are so secretive with playbooks and whatnot, because I could literally hand you my playbook and explain to you verbatim how I would do something. And you can go out there and literally do none of it, and it will look like a completely different scheme.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of, football in general, is because there's so much that goes on from a preparation standpoint that no one from an average Joe perspective would understand or see. And the fact that Troy Aikman brought it up last night, I thought was really good. And that's why I like listening to Troy Aikman, do games instead of what I ended up getting for a Pittsburgh Steelers game. I won't even have to mention his name because people talk about him too much, but it's not that, well, this is what I would have done. This is how I did things back. Look, this is what it is. This is how it could be different. I don't know what the situation is, but that's how ex-players, ex-coaches should talk.
Yeah.
Educate instead of dictate.
Yeah.
So take a lesson from that TR from CBS, partner of Jim Nantz.
Wonder who you could be alluding to here. The mystery thickens.
the plot thickens. But anyways, no, like I said, I wanted to check in on you because I know that it was painful to watch, even when you were an Eagles fan.
Yeah.
And yes, Tampa Bay has a lot of good feel-good moments and stories and whatnot, but yeah, the fact that a guy like a Jason Kelce has to go out like that, it's sad, because he's one of the good guys in the league. He's been a cornerstone for that franchise forever, and now you're probably going to lose not only him, but the Brandon Grahams, the Fletcher Coxes. Like, you're not going to see these guys wearing Eagles colors for very much longer, which kind of a sobering reality in sports. But hey, onward and upward, as they say.
Yeah.
But again, pretty good, transition over to what I actually wanted to talk about for our first topic of tonight.
Now that smaller Kyle is sufficiently depressed, let's talk about other things.
Now that I've got you sedated, a former executive with the Philadelphia Eagles is actually doing something that we haven't really seen in the NFL.
Yeah.
And not only is she a woman, but she's Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
So Catherine Raiche, born in Montreal, and anyone who's not familiar with that name, she's the assistant general manager for the Cleveland Browns as we speak. And her journey through football has actually been pretty unique and rather unprecedented, because you look at how fast she's risen through the ranks. It's crazy to think, but it's also really inspiring for a lot of people who are looking at her as, man, if I really, focus on this and put my skills to good use, this is something that's achievable, no matter what I look like, no matter where I come from, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, again, just a brief little timeline, and then we can kind of bandy it back and forth. But, the thing that makes it so impressive is not only that, she's from Canada, but she started out as I don't want to say intern, but she was kind of like a lower level admin for the Montreal Alouettes.
Hey, Mike McDaniel started off as a ball boy, right? All you got to do is get your foot in the door there.
Yeah, and I mean, you hear these stories all the time, like, what's his name from Brad Holmes from the Detroit Lions GM, started out as a PR intern with the Rams, and then worked his way up, and now he's arguably the best GM in the NFL right now. Yeah. But going back to Catherine, I mean, the fact that she was able to kind of get her foot in the door and get someone to invest in her skill set and see what she could do. So, I mean, not only kudos to Catherine, but like, hey, Jim Pop, kudos to you for, seeing the talent that she brought to the table, even when she wasn't at, the level of where she is now, because a lot of voices get canceled out if you're not in a certain, in a certain level of an organization. So, I mean, she goes from the Alouettes to the Argos, then goes from the Argos to, I believe it was the Vipers of the XFL.
Tampa Bay Vipers.
Tampa Bay Vipers. Yeah, that's right. And then got her big break in the NFL with your Philadelphia Eagles. And again, made a very good connection there with Andrew Barry, who's now the GM and VP of the Cleveland Browns. And together, outside of maybe one recent trade that they've made, have made a very good foundation with the Cleveland Browns that we haven't seen in our lifetime. Because I don't know about you, I've seen a lot of the Cleveland Browns, being a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I'm never worried about the Pittsburgh Steelers when they play the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
Now, Cleveland's got one of those teams that they're just one or two pieces away from making that next step up. And they ultimately were a lot of people's like dark horse pick for a Super Bowl run this year, right? So, I mean, let's just talk about her impact that she's made at every step that she's taken, and just kind of, where the sky is for her, because obviously she's young. She's born 1989. So she's obviously very young in the game. And could she be the first female GM in the NFL? I mean, I definitely think so. But what do you think?
Well, that's number one, the sobering reality that you and I are now at the stage of our lives where, we always knew, okay, 18-year-olds get drafted into the NHL. Yeah, we're older than them. Usually front office executives are like these old 55-year-old guys, and they're balding, beer guts, all of that. And now we've got here we've got a 1989 young woman here who is guess what, now is assistant GM for her second NFL franchise, has had ties to the XFL, has had ties to the CFL, which again, for anyone who's trying to make a name for themselves in the sports industry, like, network, because how did she go from the CFL to the XFL? Oh, Mark Trestman was over with the Tampa Bay Vipers, who had ties to the Alouettes, and right. So she's very much parlayed her success in a very rapid fashion, like you were saying, and risen through the ranks. And right now, actually just at the winter meetings for the NFL, so December 11th through 13th, took part in the NFL's GM and front office accelerator program. So it's essentially liaising with owners, executives, the people who ultimately make these decisions, right? So she's getting that training. She's putting, a face to the name. She's got a solid resume, and the Denver Broncos were apparently just interviewing a few female candidates for some of their front office positions as well too. But she could be very well on her way to becoming the first GM in NFL history.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's just very, it's unique, but it's unique in the way that, again, it's motivational for a lot of people, whether they're female or not. Because again, like we had mentioned, she's not coming from a place that every single front office person is coming from. She doesn't have a background like most of these front office people have. She doesn't have relatives that start out in the business, and like the Sean McVays of the world, whose grandfather was a coach and a GM, then his dad was involved, and then he kind of gets into it and then ends up being really good at it. She's had to work her way up, like, has a master's degree. She's educated. She obviously knows what she's doing. Like, she's literally earned everything that she's got to this point. So that's what makes it unique, because this is basically the whole world of nepotism all rolled into one. Is just professional sports.
Yeah.
Nepotism is at its peak when you look at front offices, ownership groups, coaching staffs. Like, it makes you sick when you actually peel the onion back a little bit. So the fact that she's doing it in such a way that she's making it her own and she's doing a good job with it. Yeah. Like, this is something that is really going to make some waves, especially if she ends up becoming that first, female GM in the NFL, because of the impact it's going to have not only on Canadians, but women all over the world.
Yeah.
Right. So this is exactly the type of story that we want to see end in success. We don't want to see things happen where it's like, oh, well, Cleveland, they underperformed. So Jimmy Haslam, the rogue that he is, gassed the front office. And like, if you don't see what they're doing, I mean, yes, every single team, every single group is going to have their misses. I mean, as an Eagles fan, you can speak to how many swings and misses that Howie Roseman's made over the course of time there. But hey, sometimes you just go through a span of good luck, and that's all it takes, right? You have a 5-year window, and if you're good for 3 or 4 of those 5 years, then that's all it takes for you to actually have a career on. So, anyways, wanted to start off with that. It's a feel-good story. I love the fact that, like you were mentioning, she's going through not only, the on-the-job experience, but those accelerator programs that's getting her even more exposure. So as we have deemed I guess our, segment ending little thing here, golf clap to Catherine Raiche.
Golf claps right there. And just so that no one tries to fact check us here and say, oh, it was actually Susan Toast Spencer, first GM. Okay. We did the homework here, right?
Yeah.
Unofficial, was never technically named GM, legal counsel of the Philadelphia Eagles, who, oh my Lord, if you dig into this story, we should do an episode on it one day of just peeling back the onions here. But she sold the team plane. She laid off a ton of staff. She had to be removed from the sales process and then have a restraining order put on her to not be involved with the team anymore. So we are just erasing her from any kind of debate about actually being the first GM because she was never officially given that title. So the mantle is still up for grabs. If there's any internet sleuths out there who want to try and nitpick our segments here.
And you know what? If you're an internet sleuth, shut up.
That too. Yeah. Nerd.
Anyways, but yeah, again, great story, great for the game of football. And again, kind of leads us into our second topic of the evening. Obviously we mentioned the CFL already, and given the fact that we're a Canadian show, we probably should talk about the Canadian Football League. I'm rocking my my BC Lions shirt here. Just kind of, showing love to the league, showing love to the team. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of a weird offseason for the CFL because everyone knows the CFL is a quarterback league, right? 3 downs, you're throwing the football a lot. Usually every offseason, we're seeing like 4 or 5 of these teams that are like, hey, look at all these big free agents that are on the market. We're going to be in a bidding war to get them all in there. And then it's basically a quarterback carousel, right? Yeah. This year, you don't see that. You look at what is laid out in front. Every team's pretty much got their starting quarterback solidified, maybe save for the Ottawa Redblacks. But you look at Toronto, Chad Kelly, young, just signed a huge contract. Montreal, defending Grey Cup champs, Cody Fajardo, young, just led your team to a Grey Cup. He's not going anywhere. Saskatchewan, they just gave a huge signing bonus to Trevor Harris. Is Corey Mace the new head coach there? He's not going anywhere. I mean, and then you look across every single team. Calgary and Ottawa are kind of the outliers there because, one, they don't have, a legit person who's taken over on their team. But 2, Jeremiah Masoli just had to restructure his contract just to stay on the team. Sean Burke's come out and said, we're not really committed, to Jeremiah being the quarterback. He knows where he is in his career. We're going to evaluate every option. Okay. That pretty much tells you all you need to know about that. And then Calgary, you've got Meyer there. He's the young guy who you've basically jettisoned all of your other veteran quarterbacks for. So you're pretty much all in on him unless something, happens and the wheels fall off in the first few weeks of the season. But this is why you go out and invest in a high-level backup. Yeah. And obviously, as we've seen in the CFL the last few years, backups are more important than ever. But this is the thing. If you're a quarterback who's looking to maybe get a shot at the NFL or one of these other leagues by getting your name out there in the CFL, there's not really that many starting jobs available, especially because pretty big name just came back as well for Edmonton and McLeod Bethel Thompson, who's now taking over for Chris Jones and the Elks. So, I mean, let's just dissect this a little bit and just kind of see like where are these teams going to go? One, to entice these guys to come in and back up, but then two, if I'm Ottawa and I'm looking at the whole market as a, my smorgasbord, hey, I can offer something that no other team can offer right now.
Mhm. Well, that's just it, right? Is last season in week 1, there were 7 different starting quarterbacks than what was the starters at week 1 of 2022, right? And in a 9-team league, that is fairly significant there that 7 of those franchises had a new face at the helm. So I think we're kind of seeing the domino effect of that as far as there was so much change last season that inevitably things were going to quiet down a little bit unless there was all of a sudden going to be a mass exodus to the NFL practice rosters or something like that where I would love to be kind of a fly on the wall after Nathan Rourke has had a few pops there to just really hear what his honest opinion about like went from being the guy in the CFL to up and down practice roster, third string. Now I'm in New England. Like he was just all over the place. And it's like, okay, was the grass really greener on the other side? Or would you have been better served? Like, hey, I'm going to put down some roots here. And yeah, my dream might have been NFL, but maybe that's not in the cards. And you can ask a lot of longtime veteran CFL quarterbacks what their experience was, and they'll say they wouldn't trade it for the world. Right. So it's definitely a byproduct of what happened last year, but at the same time too, there's one name that's out there that should be at the top of a lot of lists right now. And if I'm the Ottawa Red Blacks, I would be taking a long, hard look at Drew Brown and what sort of options there's going to be coming out of there. Because again, Winnipeg Blue Bombers, I don't think we're breaking any news here saying that they're essentially the gold standard of the CFL the last couple of seasons, right? Where you can pretty much just pencil them in for 12 or more wins and probably a deep playoff run, and away you go. So he's kind of log jammed there. Does he want to necessarily go and be another backup again? Or is he looking for that opportunity where, hey, Ottawa, I love you guys, but I don't think you're just one piece away from being that kind of Grey Cup contender this year. I think,
Yeah.
he's hopefully going to take some steps forward, but, he could be someone who comes in and really solidifies that franchise. Because you look at the numbers he put up in a backup role last year, right? 983 yards, 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on only 89 pass attempts. So every 10th time he's throwing the ball, someone's finding pay dirt, right?
Yeah.
So he's definitely the prize, I would say, out there. And he's only 26 years old as well, too,
Yeah.
right? This isn't, you look at some of the other quarterbacks who are going to be available, they're likely in the 30 to 33 years old kind of range. So to me, he's someone that I would really be bringing in for some interviews once free agency opens up. And again, is it the worst thing to bring him in and see what Masoli has left in the tank during training camp and put them in a QB battle? I think steel sharpens steel here, and you're going to find out one way or another real quick which one of those two quarterbacks you're going to hitch your cart to.
Yeah. And you're 100% right with Drew Brown. Obviously, I think he's the apple of a lot of people's eyes going into this offseason because, as we all know, there's always that one backup that comes in and just shines, and everyone looks at them and saying that's the next guy. I mean, we go back to when Zach Caleros was backing up, right? And he came in and just lit it up, and everyone said, "Yeah, this guy's going to be a star in this league," and then turned into a star in this league.
Mhm.
Then you look at, fast forward to a couple of years ago, Nick Arbuckle, right? Came in for Calgary with an injured Bo Levi Mitchell, looked pretty damn good. And this guy's going to be the next guy. And then it just didn't work out the way that it should have. But who's to know how that happened, right?
Yeah.
Could have been coaching, could have been environment, could have been off field. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different factors that come in there. So it's always a pick your poison when it comes to, okay, well, we're going to entrust our franchise with this guy, even though it's a small sample size that we're getting. But I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting about Dustin Crum in this whole situation. Whereas, if I'm looking at that from the management perspective, look, this guy's still only 24 years old, right? He just finished his first year of professional football where he was kind of thrown into a situation that he probably was not ready to take on.
Mm-hmm.
And by all intents and purposes, he did pretty well. He showed a skill set that he never really showed in college, which was his legs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Anytime you can buy yourself time and, kind of get those extra first downs to keep drives alive, that's what you want out of a CFL quarterback. You don't need to be chucking the ball downfield like like a Danny McManus circa 1989, 1991, Matt Dunnigan, right? The new age CFL, you want these guys who are mobile, who are smart, who, they're not going to take a lot of chances, but they're going to be very efficient with the football,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that's an interesting QB battle, given that you've already got Jeremiah Masoli, who was once the prize free agent that you lured in. You've got the upstart, Dustin Crum, and I'll get into this in a second, but he was actually a negotiation list quarterback, which is a very interesting, part of the CFL, which I can kind of, dissect a little bit more. But you look at the different tiers of where you can grab quarterbacks, or anybody for that matter. So it's free agency. It's the draft, which is very seldom used in the CFL. You've got the negotiation list, and then you've also got NFL players coming back,
Mm-hmm.
right? So where I thought you were going with your point before you mentioned Drew Brown was there's a guy who's been in the NFL for the last few years who everyone's been clamoring to get back, which is Chris Streveler, right? So, I mean, you've got a few.
I don't know, that New York Jets quarterback room there. Oh man.
But you've got a few guys, and you've mentioned a couple of them. Like, obviously, I think if Nathan Rourke was to come back and say, "Hey, I want to play. Yeah. I'm not happy, collecting a check sitting on a bench," which a lot of guys would be.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a competitor, maybe that's something that you're not, right? So, is he going to come back? If he does come back, is it going to be a situation where, hey, there's only 2 spots available, but if I'm a team that says, look, if I bring you in here, I'm going to cut my guy or trade him for something. Mm-hmm. A la the Red Blacks back when they took in Kevin Glenn with the expansion draft. Oh, Henry Burris is available now. Oh, hey, we're going to ship Kevin Glenn off and then sign Henry to come in.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that can happen in the course of a month, right? But there's a few other things that I would consider if I'm a quarterback needy team, which is one of these, either Ottawa or Calgary, because we forgot to mention Hamilton, but I mean, Hamilton still has Bo Levi Mitchell. Mm-hmm. He's restructured his contract. Look, the reason why it didn't work last year is because he got hurt.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Bo Levi Mitchell is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league when he's healthy. You just got to roll the dice and hope that he stays healthy for the full season, right? So, there's another way that I think that if you're not exploring this option, you're not doing yourself a service. Edmonton's got a young QB who happens to be a ratio buster as a Canadian. Mm-hmm. Trey Ford. I mean, you look at when they put him in their lineup last year. They were the worst team in the CFL by a mile. The second he came on the field, he energized that club, and they ended up looking pretty competitive the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they're kind of discrediting that and going after a McLeod Bethel Thompson to come in and be this guy who's going to turn their team around, this is typical American bias, if I'm being very open about it. Yeah. If I'm a team that I'm like, look, I'm not so sure, I might have a name as my quarterback, but I want to bring in somebody who's going to push that guy, who's going to be breathing down his neck. And then if something happens, I can pop him in there. Hey, I'm willing to make a trade for a guy like Trey Ford to come in because I see potential with him. I see an ability that not a lot of people possess. Like we just mentioned, the ability to use your legs to extend plays. Well, no one does it better than that guy. I mean, you can compare him if anybody wants to say, well, I don't really watch a lot of CFL. He's Lamar Jackson-esque, mm-hmm. right? People will criticize his arm, but they're going to praise him when he uses his legs. Mm-hmm. Well, he throw the ball pretty well, too. There's a reason why he's quarterback in the CFL. So there's a lot of different options. So, I mean, this is a very unique spot, especially when you're one of 9 who kind of has your pick of the litter of, look, if we can do this right, we can be the premier destination to bring in one of these top level backups, free agents, guys coming back. So let's make the most of this situation, because it's probably not going to happen again for another 10 years.
Yeah. Well, that's just it, right? Is typically you see these free agency periods be almost arms races, right? With let's stockpile as many assets as we can. So you really need to, if you're a quarterback needy team, use this kind of market lull, so to speak, here to your advantage, that you're not bidding blindly against, all these other clubs there. You kind of know that, hey, if we set a number but promise an opportunity, it's that opportunity that a lot of the other clubs can't present, right? They may be able to write you a bigger, slightly bigger check, but guess what? We've kind of already got our guy, and short of an ACL tear, like, you're not getting on the field, right?
Yeah.
So I think some of these, at least over the last couple of years, kind of bottom feeding teams, this is their chance to really reset that culture. And it all starts under center with a quarterback. And you can go a variety of ways, right? You can bring in someone coming back from the NFL south of the border. You can grab a backup. You can try and develop some of those guys that have been on your bench there. If you're a Red Blacks fan, like, I see no reason why you can't have Crum, Masoli, and Brown on the roster, because the amount of quarterbacks they have cycled through in the nation's capital over the last couple of seasons, like, it's starting to look like that Cleveland Brown fans back of his jersey, that all the quarterbacks since Tim Couch there, someone almost needs to start one of those for the Red Blacks since, Henry Burris, essentially. So
Yeah.
Here, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and that's indicative of what we were talking about at the very beginning of the show, which is a dart throw,
Yeah.
right? Like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that's, the chance that you take whenever you bring in someone in professional sports, which is why it's so interesting and fun for people to follow.
Yeah.
Because this guy, he's a sure thing. He's going to come in and change the franchise. Oops.
Yeah.
That didn't work out.
And
right?
that's how we ended up with Drew Bowen on the team there.
Bruce Bowen's second nephew.
Yeah. But it's something that, a lot of these front offices should be gearing up for that.
Yeah.
Hey, this is not just your typical off season, because again, when the market is so small and when there's only so few kind of proven commodities out there, if you've got a chance to strike when the iron's hot, you need to take advantage of it. Otherwise, you could be kicking yourself for several seasons down the line, because the same problem you had in 2021, 2022, 2023 is still there in 2026, 2027. And all of a sudden, it just becomes a lost decade for your franchise at that point. But the one thing I will say before I move on from this topic here, though, is even trying to do any kind of research on numbers, CFL. I'll do it for free. I'll run your friggin' stats, because my God.
Oh, no. Never offer to do anything for free. Never.
The first taste is free. Then they get hooked.
Oh, now
we're gonna run this like a meth lab here.
The drug deal. Perfect. This is actually the joke. Good job.
Yeah, this is how all of our models run. But honestly, like, how a casual fan is supposed to navigate their website, just find something as simple as just passing yards. Like, it's atrocious. And this isn't just a recent thing. Fans have been demanding this for years, and it hasn't improved at all. So CFL, get your life together. I thought when, PFF was going to hop on board with them, that it's going to be this big revolution, and it just hasn't happened. Like, it's something simple. I don't need the advanced metrics. Give me the stats. Give me a game log of a player. Like, it's not hard.
So you know what you do? You go and contact Kyle Skinner at Dine Sports Management.
Yeah.
Bring them on to run your statistics.
First week is free.
Yeah, exactly. Give you a little taste, know. Yeah. We're not promoting drug use, everyone. Don't worry. We're not promoting it.
Yeah. Just the models of economics that they use.
Sheer business savvy.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I just kind of want to touch on how, because I mentioned negotiation lists, and not all know what that is, right? The CFL is kind of in a unique spot where they can actually identify underclassmen in the NCAA and kind of move them around and say, okay, I think this guy is going to be good in 2 to 3 years. I'm putting him on our negotiation list because whenever he becomes available to play professional football, if he doesn't go to the NFL, if he doesn't want to go play in the XFL, USFL, whatever FL league they're starting next year, we have exclusive rights to negotiate a contract with this player. Mm-hmm. If he doesn't want to negotiate with us, we can trade those rights to somebody else and get compensation back. Again, we can go back to someone everyone knows, Johnny Manziel. When he came up to the CFL, he was on Hamilton's negotiation list. Hamilton signed him to a contract and then traded him to Montreal. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that I've laid that out, I'll just go through a few of the names who are on each team's individual negotiation list as of December 12th of last year. So this is very updated. Most of the players you're going to see on these lists are quarterbacks because, as we mentioned, the CFL is a quarterback needy, heavy league. Yeah. If you don't have a quarterback, you ain't winning. So from the top to bottom, the BC Lions, we've got Brendan Armstrong from North Carolina State. We've got Noah Fafita from Arizona. We've got Frank Harris from Texas San Antonio, Mikey Keene from Fresno State, Giovanni McCoy from Idaho, and Kadon Salter from Liberty. Now, most of you probably don't know who any of these guys are. I'll highlight the ones who are actually showing a little bit of promise that could end up in the CFL one day. Out of this list, Kadon Salter from Liberty, decent quarterback, has the skill set with, good with his legs, big arm down the field, fits the mold of what a CFL quarterback's looking to do. Probably won't end up as your day one starter on an NFL team, so could bounce around and then make his way back here. Edmonton, we've got Holden Ehlers from East Carolina. KJ Jefferson, who was at Arkansas, has since transferred to Central Florida for this season. We've got Cameron Rising from Utah, Spencer Sanders from Mississippi, and Dresser Wynn. It's a real name. Dresser Wynn from Tennessee Martin. So out of those, they've actually got 3 kind of big name NCAA quarterbacks on that list with KJ Jefferson, Cameron Rising, and Spencer Sanders. Realistically, out of those guys, KJ Jefferson and Spencer Sanders really are the 2 that stick out. So look for those names going forward. Calgary, James Blackman, Arkansas State, Davis Brin, Georgia Southern, Theo Day, Northern Iowa, Josh Love, San Jose State. Not really anything of substance there. So who knows? Maybe they got a diamond in the rough.
Moving on.
Yeah, moving on. Saskatchewan Roughriders, Chase Garbers from California, Jordan McLeod from James Madison, and Zach Zabrowski, who sounds like a 1980s Chicago detective.
Or an extra on Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, or on Saved by the Bell. Just going to go down the max with AC Slater and Screech and get himself a ball.
Kelly Kapowski's cousin.
Yeah, Zabrowski. I had to see the captain of the police force, Zabrowski. But anyways, so again, Chase Garbers, California, don't really see him as an NFL prospect, so could end up coming up to the CFL eventually and maybe making a roster. Winnipeg, kind of the, as you mentioned, the gold standard for identifying, talent, but not really that much in regards to what they've got in the negotiation list from a quarterback perspective. Carter Bradley from South Alabama, Darren Granger from Georgia State, and Mark Gronowski, not Gronkowski, Mark Gronowski from South Dakota State. So South Dakota State, pretty, popular for pumping out professional quarterbacks that end up coming up to the CFL. So maybe a name to keep an eye on there. And, obviously you've got some fondness for some, for some North Dakota State quarterbacks.
Oh, let me tell you there, the Carson Wentz experience was something. I've got a jersey of his. I don't know what to do with it, right? But
you know what? He could be up in the CFL soon. Who knows?
Well, with the state of backup quarterbacks in the NFL, I think he's got his pick of the litter of where he wants to go sit on a bench and hold a clipboard next year. But I digress.
Hamilton Tiger Cats, Thomas Castellanos from Boston College, Daquan Finn from Toledo, Andrew Peasley from Wyoming, Austin Reed from Western Kentucky, and Tolia Tungavailoa, who is obviously the brother of Tua. Talia is kind of the big name on that list. He was a very good quarterback for Maryland. He's since entered the NFL draft, so we'll see what happens with him. But again, keep an eye out for that name because doesn't necessarily possess the same skill set as his brother does. So again, could come up to refine his skills and maybe end up down there after a year or two up here. Argos, Jason Bean from Kansas, Nolan Henderson from Delaware, Josh Matocha from the Colorado School of Mines, the very prestigious Colorado School of Mines. And
John, if there's one industry that is set for a comeback, it's coal.
I mean, coming from a mining town myself in Sudbury, shout out to the Wolves. I respect, I got mad respect for the Colorado School of Mines for sure.
There you go. We, if anyone's listening that can send us a jersey, Kyle will wear it on the next episode if you send a care package to him.
Anyone from the Colorado School of Mines that wants to send us a jersey, I will absolutely wear it for as long as I need to. No problem. No questions asked. Number 65, by the way. And then John Reese Plumley from Central Florida. So that's a name that I would keep an eye on. Played on both the baseball and football teams as a starting quarterback and one of the starting pitchers. So kid's obviously got a cannon. Decent quarterback. Again, maybe didn't have as much potential that you could have seen had he chose one or the other. But again, he's an athlete. Let's bring him up here and see what he can do. Name to keep an eye out for. Here we go. Ottawa. They've got Ben Bryant from Northwestern, Tim DeMorat from Fordham, Will Howard. They recently transferred to that school in Ohio. Cam
Shall
Miller
not be named.
we absolutely will not be naming that school. And Cam Miller from North Dakota State.
There we go. Fellow Bison.
Yeah. So again, Will Howard, that's a guy that if he has a good year with the school in Ohio this year, he could actually, get some attention from the NFL, but he possesses the skill set that you want. He's kind of like a Buck Pierce type of quarterback for anyone who was watching the CFL back in the mid 2000s. And last but not least, the Montreal Alouettes, and this is pretty heavy from quarterbacks because they always kind of go all in. Davis Cheek from Elon, Brett Gabbert from Miami, Ohio, Parker McKinney from Eastern Kentucky, James Morgan from Florida International, EJ Perry from Brown. And this is a guy that I think will be in the CFL and will be a starter in the next 5 years. Lindsey Scott Jr. from Incarnate Word. The reason I say that is because this guy is a record-setting quarterback. Anyone who wants to go Google him, Lindsey Scott Jr. has shattered every single record in the league that he is in. I think Incarnate Words did 1AA, if I'm not mistaken. He literally has touchdown records, passing yards records, rushing yards records. He is Mr. Div 1AA. I have a feeling that he's going to end up in the CFL and will be a starter in the next 5 years. So after all that, we've got some prospects to keep our eye on for the next few years, but that's a negotiations list work, everybody. So
start the clock. 5 years or less there. Incarnate Word is going to be the CFL pipeline of the Americas.
If we are still on the air in 5 years, we are going to have the biggest cheers moment when Lindsey Scott Jr. is winning a Grey Cup for the Montreal Alouettes. But anyways, that's basically in a nutshell how CFL teams can get creative with kind of mapping out their quarterback road over the course of a number of years. But
and this is also how you can see why there's such usually in most years a quarterback carousel, right? Because it's not just all right, who got drafted this year and this is who we're picking from. It's literally you've got these negotiation lists, you've got the CFL draft, you've got players moving in between teams themselves, free agency. So with all these funnels and 9 starting spots, you can see why it turns into a game of musical chairs at times here north of the border.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of north of the border, I mean, let's end off the show talking about our beloved sport of hockey.
Which, and for anyone who tuned in, we made it through like an episode and a half before we even touched hockey here. So I think that's a golf clap in and of itself for a little diversity in the programming here. Look at us go.
you know what? We like to be diverse. We like to be open minded. We like to talk about a number of different things. And that's what we're doing. We're bringing the people what they want to hear. But now, obviously, we caved. We got to hockey on the second show. But yeah, I think this is a very, interesting thing to talk about because one, we haven't seen it very often
Mhm.
in like the last quarter century. But there's two Canadian teams atop the NHL standings pretty much halfway through the season with the
The
Winnipeg.
Ottawa Senators. Oh, yeah. No, that didn't happen this year. Oh, we're in rebuild year number 8 now.
So
Sweet.
you know what? We're going to dedicate an entire series of episodes for Kyle just so he can go on whatever type of rant he needs to go on to talk about the state of the Ottawa Senators. Because I know that you, out of everyone that I probably know the most about them, probably follow the team more closely than anyone, and then have to endure the utter disappointment that comes with being a Senators fan the last 10 years.
Well, if anyone has ever seen the scene in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Charlie goes off the deep end with the conspiracy theories, and he's got the crazy eyes and all the red string attaching everything together, and like that's what that episode's going to be. Essentially, it's
Yeah.
it's going to be a whole lot of ranting. You're going to be sitting in the background there, just kind of throwing out a topic, and what did you think about the Dorian years? And then off he goes again for another
Yeah.
half hour spurt. So yeah, that's going to be a lengthy episode, but yeah, I mean, the Vancouver Canucks and the Winnipeg Jets here sitting atop their respective divisions. And it's not just like, oh, okay, they've miraculously done it in spite of some of the other teams because of injuries or have piled up or anything like that. They've done this on their own merit here. And I don't think a ton of people preseason had this on their bingo card as far as at the halfway point, who's going to be atop the Pacific and the Central Division. Oh, it's Winnipeg and Vancouver after the seasons they had last year.
Yeah. And I mean, the really unique thing about what they're doing is that they're doing it in different ways.
Yeah.
If you look at how the Jets are doing it, they're just playing lights out defense.
Yeah.
Like they've got two goalies with sub 2.2 goals against averages. They've got their defense core, who I think all of them are plus in the plus minus column, which again, you never see. And you've just got a group effort where it's like you don't see a guy getting a point a game
No.
across the whole roster. You've just got four lines that they can roll out. They play good defense. They're two-way forwards. You've got a defense group that obviously plays well together, that knows how to get the puck out of their own zone to prevent goals. And
What a
you've got
novel idea. Hey, Ottawa, take note.
maybe you should bring back Rick Bonus from
Oh my God. Yeah. All right. What's old is new again in the nation's capital here.
3 decades too early hiring him as your coach. That's all.
Ah, yeah, he was a late bloomer, not a wonderkind. But you're so right. It's two very different ways that they're playing, right? Like you were just saying, the Jets, they're just a balanced lineup up and down that group, whether it's on defense, whether it's on forwards, whether it's in the crease. And,
And how good does Connor Hellebuck re-signing look right now?
oh my God, I know. And people were saying in the offseason when it was like, oh, he might want out. Should Ottawa kind of trade for him? And they were like, he's 30. He's old. We don't want him. Yeah, okay. He's probably going to win another Vezina this year. But yeah, Ottawa's goaltending lights out. Let's go with that. But I think it's
goalies, Kyle.
yeah. I think it's kind of an addition by subtraction is what you're seeing with the Jets here. Because they made a pretty big trade not that long ago there in shipping Pierre-Luc Dubois out to the Los Angeles Kings, who promptly then signed an 8-year, $8.5 million AAV contract out there, and not doing so hot.
No.
Don't know if you've seen or not, but currently only has through 40 games played here 19 points and is actually a minus 10 on a roster that is actually probably one of the better. They're on a skid right now, but over the last year and a half have probably been one of the more defensively sound teams in the NHL. So that contract is an absolute albatross. Meanwhile, Iafallo, who was kind of just a throw-in, has pretty much the exact same stat line as him, but is a +2 and at like a tenth of the price that he came in at. And Gabe Viardi comes in. They got Montreal's second rounder for this upcoming draft as part of that too. And Montreal doesn't look like they're going anywhere anytime soon here. So that's going to be a fairly early, probably late 30s, early 40s pick there. So you're going to get a good impact player there. And then they got a prospect out of it as well too. So it's a very balanced lineup up and down there.
Yeah.
Whereas Vancouver is the most probably top heavy lineup in the entire league. Yeah. So Pedersen, Miller, and Boser line have combined for 70 goals this year.
Yeah.
Every other forward on the entire roster has combined for 72. So literally their top line is 50% of their offense. So when they go cold, it's going to be a long night for the Canucks there. So two really different strategies, but you're seeing it pan out in the standings, and you can't argue with the results at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, right now, Vancouver's got 5 players who are at a point a game pace.
Yeah.
Which is insane, especially given the fact that one of them is a defenseman.
Yeah. Well, right. Quinn Hughes, with already 52 points on the season, leads all NHL defensemen in that category. But not sure if you heard this fun little tidbit there, but good friend Bruce Boudreau actually recently came out and said that there was a high-ranking official in the Vancouver Canucks front office who was trying to convince him to make Quinn Hughes a forward, right? And Boudreau refused, and that was apparently part of the reason why he ultimately kind of got shown the door there out on the West Coast. So Brucey looking like a genius right now. So golf claps to Mr. Bruce Boudreau at this point here. Way to stick to your guns.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, the thing that really is nice to see, like we were mentioning, like Winnipeg's doing it from shutting somebody down.
Yeah.
Vancouver's doing it by lighting somebody up. So, I mean, yeah, excuse me. I'm getting choked up from, just talking about all these goals being scored. Yeah. But, you look like you want to say something. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, Connor Hellebuck's play can't be downplayed at this point, right? Like, you look at it, right? He's got already all of his stats are in the top 5 for every single category, whether it's goals against average, whether it's shutouts, whether it is save percentage. Like, he's en route to another season, just like it was in 2019 and 2020, where he is carrying this team. And you see the confidence that the lineup in front of him, which let's call it what it is, they're succeeding. But if you put just an on paper lineup up against all the other, 32 NHL franchises, no one is going to walk up and be like, Winnipeg, this on paper team is the one that I think is going to be leading the Central Division here. And so it's a testament to, everyone skates a little bit faster, acts a little bit tougher, stands a little bit taller. When you've got confidence in the person who is playing goalie behind you.
Yeah.
And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you see the absolutely deflating, demoralizing, crumbling effect that when you get spotty goaltending and you're constantly losing these 1-goal games and you're like, how do we blow another 3-goal lead and whatnot? Like, these are some mental reps that aren't going to rear their head in the regular season, where, especially when you get into like game 67 in Arizona here in mid-February or whatever it is, right? Like, Toronto's not going to have to worry about that now. But when it comes time to playoffs, right? The Toronto Maple Leafs, with all of their recent playoff failures, and who knows who's going to be, between the pipes for them in the postseason, right? We've seen Samsonov up and down. We've seen Wall get hurt. Martin Jones has come in. Like, oh my God, it's all over the place. So, like, these are the things where, even though you put their 2 paper lineups side by side, most people would think, yeah, Toronto's got a much better lineup than the Jets do. Well, guess what? I if I'm a betting man, I'm putting money on the Jets advancing farther in the playoffs than the Leafs are.
For sure. No, and you're 100% right. And going back to the Hellebuck thing, the crazy part about how well he's doing is that it's actually being mirrored by his backup in Laurent Brossoit, which is kind of upsetting to me, being an Edmonton Oilers fan, because why does this always happen where these middling goaltenders for Edmonton go somewhere else and become these lights out type of, I'm on a, William Jennings, type of goaltending tandem where we're with the goals against average crown. Like, I don't get it. But
Yeah.
I
Oilers and Senators fans need to form some sort of support group in that regard, because the exact same thing happens in Ottawa, right? Philip Gustafson goes out there and all of a sudden he's a Vezina candidate. Joey Decord was like our seventh string goaltender in like the ECHL and whatnot, and now is a starting goaltender for the Seattle Kraken, and they just rattled off like 7 straight wins. Like
they,
it's insane that as soon as they change area codes, they
yeah.
turn into these world beaters.
Now that being said, I mean Edmonton has won 11 in a row. Stuart Skinner looks pretty damn good right now. So I mean,
Cousin Stu.
cousins too. He's anyways. Golf clap for cousin Stu.
Golf clap for cousin Stu. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. And our other cousin there, Jeff Skinner. As
Jeff
well,
Skinner.
too, right?
Just like a lamp out in Buffalo.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, going back to Vancouver, we mentioned a few things, but it's like, yes, they're scoring a lot of goals, but you look at the goaltending they're getting as well. It's no slouch. Thatcher Demko, he's been a top prospect for years. They gave him the reins a couple years ago, and now you're really starting to see the fruits of that labor paying off.
Yeah.
Right? He's making big saves when he needs to. He's keeping his team in the game because, again, he's getting confidence knowing that, well, it's all right if I let in 1 or 2 because my guys are going to go and get that right back. So I can bounce back a lot easier than a guy, in a situation like Ottawa who might let up an easy one, but then can't bounce back because, if we don't score, 2 tonight, we might lose. Yeah. Right. So anyways, it's a tale of 2 different formats, and the fact that they're both succeeding and excelling right now, it's just awesome. And the fact that, again, they're 2 non-traditional powers in the NHL. I mean, obviously Vancouver went through their spurt with the Sedins and whatnot, where they were kind of, in the running for president's trophies and all that kind of good stuff. Look, they haven't really been a successful franchise in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
The Winnipeg Jets, they've kind of been that roller coaster team where they're good, they're not good. They're good, they're not good. So seeing these teams succeed, it's kind of nice for not only us as Canadians, but again, as an entire fan base of an NHL, because you want diversity in the game. You want parity in the game. It's the best way to do it. Mm-hmm. You get the Vegases winning Stanley Cups. You get the bottom feeders for years, like the Lightning and the Avalanche, who eventually rise up and become these superpowers. These are things that keep people invested, right? If we saw Detroit and New Jersey and Dallas back in the 90s, and they ran into the 2000s and then again into the 2010s and then into the 2020s, people lose interest in that.
No.
Right? Why do you think there's not going to I'm telling you this right now. After the Buffalo-Kansas City game in the NFL this weekend, I'll guarantee you more people are going to be watching the Baltimore-Houston game.
Yeah.
Right? Why is that? Because Houston has never been in this position before where they have optimism and hope. Baltimore, again, they've struggled to get past that one point. Now they're at a position where they're the top dog. But again, I'm digressing from my original point just to kind of prove my point. But this is exactly what you want. And you can say what you want from a league perspective, saying, well, we want our big market teams to be successful. And that's true. Like, they drive big revenue, through the doors, media, sponsorships, whatever. But where's the majority of your viewership coming from? North of that border.
Yeah.
So if you can have a big market team like a Vancouver doing well, that's good for business. You can have a team like a Winnipeg doing well. Well, guess what Winnipeg owns? They own the entire prairie. That's their team, right? So Winnipeg.
Which, if anyone has never even seen or been to a playoff game at Winnipeg Jets with their whiteout and everything, like it's an electric factory there. So it's definitely worth tuning in, even if you're not a fan of the Jets or anyone in the Western Conference. Like, stay up late, watch those games there, and then you tell me that it's a bad thing for the league that the Jets are succeeding right now.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, like I said, it's nice to see. Hopefully they can sustain that, and hopefully some of these other Canadian teams can again push their way into that playoff chase, like the Calgarys and like the Montreals that are kind of on the fringe right now, but if they go on a run, they could potentially get to that point.
Mhm.
I mean, Ottawa, maybe we can cross our fingers for them. Toronto, if they get a
Right
goalie.
now, it's either go out and see what Andrew Hammond is doing, or hey, Macklin Celebrini, what you would look good with an Ottawa area code on your driver's license. But
what a great story that was. And then, you know what? There's an episode for us in the future going over the famous Hamburglar run, in kind of like a documentary style.
yeah.
That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, oh yeah, the Curtis Lazar eating a burger off the ice, and oh yeah, there's more than a few juicy little tidbits in there for sure. But no, it's right, and Thatcher Demko, he's again top 10 in all of his respective categories, second in shutouts, ninth in save percentage, 10th in goals against average in the league. So they're getting it done between the pipes over there as well too. Everyone knew Philip Hronik was gonna have the breakout year that he's had, right? Of course.
I mean, talk to anybody in Vancouver, they would say that. But but yeah, no, again, great for them. But yeah, before we sign off, why don't we do a little checking right now to see where we're at? Are you okay over there?
Yeah, we're looking for a new beverage sponsor there because something went down the wrong tube on our show provided beverage right there.
Yeah.
But carry on.
All
Ignore me. I'll give you a signal if I need the Heimlich.
Just want to make sure you're all right. You look like you're about to keel over. But yeah, I mean, maybe while you're, you're fighting for your life over there, you can look up really quick to see where we're at on the Pascal Siakam trade watch.
Well, right now we've got nothing. It's still actively engaged, so
Okay.
who knows? Maybe it'll be a late night news dump there where all of a sudden Woj drops a 1 a.m. bomb on us or something. But still nothing to report on that front. I mean, covered a lot.
If that happens, I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I'll record something and send it to you, so it looks like we actually did it on the show.
Yeah, we'll just superimpose it in there. It'll just be you in your pajamas.
He superimposed me. I didn't know he was going to superimpose me.
Yeah. But covered a lot. But maybe we'll end it with this, right? We scratched the idea for predictions in the first one here.
Okay.
But let's just take Jets, Canucks. Who advances further in the playoffs if you had to pick today at the midway point of the season?
I mean, I think we've covered a lot of the points that would make my pick into a solid one. I mean, I'm going to go with the Jets.
There you go. You're going with Connor Hellebuyck to just guide him to the promised land, eh?
I'm going with the solid defensive system, the well-rounded, balanced team approach, and the two solid goaltenders that you've got back there. Again, Brassois just coming off of a Stanley Cup himself. So, I mean, you've got everything you need from, up front, behind the blue line, in the net, behind the bench to make a deep run. So yeah, I'm going to go with the Jets to sustain what they're doing right now and to be the team that advances further out of between them and the Canucks.
There you go. I'll be the contrarian here. I'll take the Canucks there and just ride that high-powered offense. And if you can get above-average goaltending out of Demko, then they could go on a little bit of a run. It's just one of those things where I look at, and again, a lot can change over the next 40 games with some of these teams that still have left. You get a key injury here or there, and suddenly these teams look a lot different heading into the playoffs. But as we sit here today on January 16th, I'll say that the Canucks advance a little bit further just because I like what their potential playoff path could kind of look like in their side of the bracket a little bit better than the Central looks like it could be a bit of a buzzsaw at this point there.
Yeah, well, again, I'm kind of a biased observer here when I'm picking the Jets because being an Oilers fan, it's kind of hard for me to say that I want the Canucks to win and do well. But yeah, at the end of the day, like I said, it's just nice to see teams that typically aren't always at the top of the standings now given a chance to do what they're doing. It's good for the league. But yeah, I mean, you didn't even make it 2 episodes without getting into the prediction shit.
First of all, you need to own your predictions here. There's going to be a running tally. We need a super fan to literally put all of this in some sort of a graphic, track our predictions, our accuracy, and then that's how you get all of the sponsors coming in. Look at these
That's
prognosticators.
see how lower percentages for predictions.
Between the two of us, we both batted under 30% on our predictions. Excellent.
Hey, this baseball. That's still you're still a good still a good batter if you're hitting 250, right?
There we go. That's the way I like to look at it.
Baseball averages more than anything.